Have you ever had that feeling like society is just, well, missing something really fundamental? Like we spend all our time trying to fix symptoms, but we never quite get a handle on the actual disease.
Absolutely. It's a common feeling, I think.
Well, if that thought's ever kind of gnawed at you, then get ready. Today, we're plunging into a really mind-bending text from, believe it or not, over a century ago.
Or G.K. Chesterton's What's Wrong with the World?
Exactly. Now, you might hear 1910 and think, okay, Dusty, maybe irrelevant. But honestly, Chesterton's insights, they feel so startlingly fresh. It's almost like he dashed it off last Tuesday.
It's quite remarkable how much still resonates.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack Chesterton's pretty radical ideas. We're going from the big picture stuff right down to the surprising, sometimes hilarious, sometimes, frankly, infuriating detail.
He definitely doesn't pull any punches.
No, he doesn't. And he's not just, diagnosing society's problems. He's actually challenging how we even think about problems in the first place. So prepare for some genuine aha moments that might just reframe how you see the modern world.
We'll be guiding you through it.
Yeah, we'll guide you through his brilliant, sometimes complex arguments. We want to make sure you walk away really well informed about his perspective. And just to be super clear up front, we're here to explore and report on Chesterton's views, which are pretty profound.
Right. Our goal is understanding the depth and the insight in his work.
Exactly.
And Chesterton, he's often seen as one of the sharpest minds of his time. This book is really a masterclass in thinking independently. He consistently pushes back against the conventional wisdom of his era, certainly. But as you said, so much of it feels relevant now, maybe even more so.
So where does he start? What's the first big salvo?
Well, he immediately throws down the gauntlet. He says the very first mistake we make in trying to fix society, any social inquiry, is rushing to find the remedy before we've even agreed on what health looks like.
Health or the ideal?
Exactly. The ideal of society. What are we actually aiming for? He calls this the medical mistake.
Okay, medical mistake. Unpack that a bit.
Think about a doctor. A doctor fundamentally knows what a healthy human body looks like. They have a standard, right?
Right. 2 legs, functioning heart, etc.
Precisely. So if someone has a broken leg, the doctor doesn't try to invent a new kind of human with an extra leg as the cure.
No, that would be absurd.
Right. They aim to restore the normal, healthy body. But when it comes to society, Chesterton says we're all aiming for vastly different states of health. My cure might be your catastrophe.
I see. So we agree something's wrong, but not on what right would be.
Exactly that. He gives the example of a lazy aristocracy. Everyone can agree, yeah, that's bad, a problem.
Sure, easy target.
But then he asks, what about the good? Would an active aristocracy be a good thing? Suddenly you've got disagreement. Deep disagreement. That's where the real conflict lies.
So it's not about the symptom, but the goal.
Precisely. And this leads to his foundational question for the whole book, the quote you mentioned. What is wrong is that we do not ask what is right. That's the core challenge.
That medical mistake idea. It seems so simple when you put it like that, but it's incredibly profound, isn't it?
It really is.
Because we do that. We jump straight to solutions. He says we're like doctors who all agree the patient's sick, but then half of them want to cure, say, Russian influenza by giving the patient German measles.
It's a comical image, but it makes the point.
It's utterly absurd in medicine, and he's saying it's just as absurd when we talk about social reform. We debate endlessly about fixes without ever having that shared vision of what a healthy society or even a healthy institution within society would actually look like.
And he uses the example of the public house, the pub.
Oh yeah, the bad public house versus the good public house. Tell us about that.
Well, he says, look, everyone can agree that a bad pub rundown, corrupt, maybe dangerous, that's a problem. We can all nod along.
Okay, yeah. Ban the bad pubs. Easy.
But then he says, what about a good pub? A vibrant place, center to the community, good conversation, good beer.
Suddenly it's not so simple.
Exactly. That's where, as he puts it so dryly, our painful personal fracas would occur. Because some people think even the best pub is inherently bad. Others see it as vital.
So criticizing the abuse is easy. Defining the proper use. That's the hard part.
That's the crux of it. Having a clear vision of the ideal.
Okay, so if we can't even agree on what health or the ideal looks like, how on earth do we ever achieve it? This must lead Chesterton somewhere interesting.
It does. It leads him to a really paradoxical idea, something that feels completely counterintuitive, especially today.
Which is?
He asks, when things go really seriously wrong, what kind of person do we actually need?
Okay, the practical person, the fixer. The get-it-done type.
That's what you'd think, right? But Chesterton says no. When things are truly broken, we don't need the conventional practical man who's just focused on immediate fixes.
Then who?
We need, he argues, an unpractical man.
A theorist.
An unpractical man, a theorist. That sounds unpractical.
Doesn't it? But his logic is this. If your airplane is seriously ill, if it's fundamentally malfunctioning, you don't just want the mechanic who tightens bolts. You need the slightly absent-minded professor who actually understands the deep aerodynamic principles, the doctrine of why the thing flies at all.
Okay, I see the logic. The more complex the problem.
The more theoretical the person needed to understand its foundation. And he uses that old philosophical joke, the chicken and the egg, to illustrate this.
Ah, the classic chicken or egg? How does he use that?
He says it's not actually a futile question. The egg exists to make the chicken, yes. Process. But the chicken doesn't just exist to make another egg.
Right. The chicken clucks around, eats corn. It can amuse itself. It can praise God, as Chesterton puts it. It can even inspire a dramatist. The chicken, the bird, is the end, the goal. The egg is just the process.
And modern politics gets this backward.
He thinks so. He says modern politics talks constantly about useful men and working institutions, essentially treating people like chickens that will lay more eggs.
Focusing only on output, on the process.
Exactly. Ignoring the intrinsic value, the ideal state of the chicken itself. And this ties into his sharp critique of what we often call efficiency.
Efficiency? That sounds like a good thing, usually.
Well, Chesterton has a very specific and critical definition. He says efficiency is basically discovering everything about a machine except what it is for.
Ouch. Okay. So it's knowing how, but not why.
Precisely. He argues it's dangerous because it only measures how well something happened after the fact. It gives you no power of choice before you act. It doesn't tell you if you should do the thing in the first place.
That makes sense. You can be very efficient at doing something terrible.
Exactly. Which leads him to this really provocative thought. There's no such thing as backing a winner, for he cannot be a winner when he is backed. You don't know who the winner is until the fight is over.
So you can't just join the winning side.
One fights to find out which is the winning side. So, paradoxically, for Chesterton, the true man of action, the one who actually changes things, has to be driven by an ideal. They must be an idealist.
That flips the script entirely.
It does. And he sees the opposite playing out in politics with what he calls the pliable politician.
The pliable politician, what's the problem there?
He laments that politicians get so caught up in opportunism, in what's achievable right now, that they become dazed and floundering. They forget what they actually desire.
They ask for what they think they can get, not what they truly want.
Exactly. They settle for the possible instead of striving for the ideal. And he points out, compromise itself only really works if you have firm principles to compromise from. If everyone is just wishy-washy, vaguely agreeing...
There's nothing solid to negotiate.
Right. He makes a great point about the word compromise itself. It contains the rigid and ringing word promise.
Yeah.
True moderation, he says, isn't about being vague. It's as definite as any extreme. You have to know what you stand for.
That's a really sharp critique of political expediency. And it leads him somewhere else fascinating, doesn't it? This idea of the new hypocrite.
Yes. This is brilliant.
It's such a great concept. So the old hypocrite, the classic one like Tartuffe or Dickens' Pecksniff.
Right. Pretends to be pious, religious, holier than thou.
But it's actually worldly, greedy, self-serving underneath. We know that type.
We do. But Chesterton says there's a new kind of hypocrite, and this one does the opposite.
Okay. How so?
The new hypocrite pretends to be worldly, practical, focused on secular things like efficiency or progress. But deep down, their real motivations are religious or dogmatic.
Give me an example.
He points to, say, a clergyman who insists he cares nothing for creeds but only for education. He presents himself as purely practical, focused on betterment.
Okay. Sounds reasonable on the surface.
But Chesterton says, in reality, the wildest Wesleyanism is tearing his soul. His deep-seated religious beliefs are the actual engine driving his push for education, but he hides it behind practical language.
So it's a fight of creeds masquerading as policies.
Exactly. Theology isn't gone, it's just concealed like a sin. People are still fighting for their fundamental beliefs, their dogmas, but they pretend it's just about practical outcomes.
Which connects right back to the start, doesn't it? This aversion to talking about the ideal, the dogma.
Precisely. And this is where he makes that crucial distinction between dogma and prejudice.
Right. People hate the word dogma. It sounds so rigid, imposing.
It does. But Chesterton says, look, fundamentally, the human mind only has two things to operate with, a dogma or a prejudice.
Okay, define those his way.
A dogma is a clear, definite point. His example.
Yeah.
An ox can be eaten, a man cannot. It's a boundary, a principle.
Got it. Clear statement.
A prejudice, on the other hand, is just a direction, like as little as possible of anything should be eaten. It's vague. It's a tendency, not a landmark.
And he thinks the vague prejudice is worse.
Much worse. He argues these vague directions, these tendencies, are actually more fantastic and isolating than clear plans or dogmas.
How so isolating?
Because vagueness divides men, it does not fuse them. When everything's just a general direction or a tendency, people end up in a fog. They avoid clear arguments.
You can't really debate a fog.
Exactly. He says, genuine controversy, fair cut and thrust before a common audience, has become in our special epoch very rare. People prefer, as he puts it, slanging or silence to actual debate. They just charge out of earshot of each other.
Wow. That sounds incredibly familiar, like describing cable news or social media today.
Doesn't it's almost eerie. Opponents talking past each other, resorting to insults, avoiding the core disagreement.
Because they aren't starting from clearly stated first principles from dogmas.
That's his argument. And the only logical cure, he claims, is to actually assert a human ideal, a permanent one, something that can't just be explained away by saying, oh, we'll just adapt to the bad conditions. No, we need a standard.
Otherwise, you could argue for adapting to anything, however terrible.
Precisely.
So where does this aversion to clear ideals, to dogma, come from then? Does he have a theory?
He does, and it's quite profound. He connects it to a deep, almost subconscious fear of the past.
Fear of the past, not just learning from its mistakes.
Something deeper. He argues we're constantly propelled towards the coming time, but not primarily out of love for the future. It's driven by a fear of the past.
Fear of its evils, tyranny, ignorance.
Not just its evils, he says, but also its good.
It's good. How can you fear the good of the past?
Think about it. The past is filled with things that are kind of intimidating. Flaming faiths, harsh heroisms, massive achievements like monumental building or of military glory. They seem sublime and pathetic, almost too big, too demanding.
Okay, I can see that. They set a high bar.
Exactly. The future, by contrast, is a blank wall. You can write your own name on it, imagine anything. But the past, it's already covered with illegible scribbles, such as Plato, Isaiah, Shakespeare. It's daunting.
So we invent new ideals.
Because, he says, we dare not attempt old ideals. We look forward with such determined enthusiasm, mainly because we are afraid to look back.
That's a challenging thought, and it connects to that common phrase.
Yes, you can't put the clock back.
We hear that all the time. You can't turn back time. Progress marches on.
And Chesterton just brilliantly skewers it. His answer is devastatingly simple. You can.
How?
He says, look, a clock is a human invention. A machine made by humans. Of course you can put the hands back. It's designed to be set.
Okay.
And society, he argues, is also a human construction. Therefore, it can be reconstructed on any plan that has ever existed before if we choose to. It's about the freedom to restore.
So just because an idea is old doesn't mean it's invalid for today's problems.
Exactly. Don't dismiss a tool just because it's been used. If it works, it works. He says, if I have made my bed uncomfortable, please God, I will make it again. It's about having the freedom to choose the best model, even if it's an old one. He even cheekily suggests proposing the restoration of Highland clans or independent Greek city-states, not necessarily because he wants them, but to show it's possible to consider old models if they address current evils.
That idea of freedom to restore leads to another really powerful image he uses, doesn't it? The unfinished temple.
Yes, that's a very potent one.
What's the idea there?
He says modern idealists, the progressives, often make a fundamental mistake. They assume that if an idea or a movement was defeated historically, it must have been wrong or flawed. Defeat equals disproof.
Yeah, that makes intuitive sense. The winners write history, the losing idea must have been weaker.
But Chesterton flips it. He says, logically, the case is quite clearly the other way around. The lost causes are exactly those which might have saved the world.
Wow, okay, unpack that. The ones that failed might have been the right ones.
Think about it. Maybe they failed not because they were wrong, but because they were too difficult, too demanding, or maybe just unlucky. They got stamped out before they could fully blossom.
So the truly transformative ideas might be among the historical failures.
That's his argument. And he uses the Christian ideal, specifically think of the Catholic Church, as his prime example.
How does he apply it there?
He says, look, the Christian ideal itself was not tried. Or rather, plenty of Catholics were tried and found guilty, meaning individual Christians failed to live up to the ideal.
Ah, so the people failed, not necessarily the ideal itself.
Exactly. He famously says the ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. People didn't tire of the ideal. They tired of the failures of the churchmen, the difficulty of living it out.
That's a very sharp distinction.
And he applies a similar logic, interestingly, to the French Revolution.
The French Revolution, how does that fit?
He calls it the type of all true revolutions, not because he endorses all its actions, but because of its ideal.
Which was?
The poor man uppermost. He says this ideal itself is incredibly old as the old Adam, a basic human desire for justice. But the fulfillment of it during the Revolution, however flawed or temporary, felt fresh, as miraculous and as new as the New Jerusalem.
So the ideal was ancient, but making it real was the shock.
Exactly. Kings went mad, he argues, not because France merely talked about this ideal, but because for a moment she actually realized it. They saw the poor genuinely taking power, and that was terrifying to the old order. He even contrasts the relative accessibility of the old French monarchy, living in glass houses that mobs might throw stones, with modern leaders who become increasingly private and inaccessible.
That's counterintuitive. The old monarchy more democratic in a way.
In its visibility and vulnerability to public opinion, yes. He quips that now a cat may not look at a king unless it is a very tame cat. The point being, power has become more shielded.
So the big takeaway from the unfinished temple in the French Revolution is?
We invent new ideals, primarily because we dare not attempt old ideals. We find the old ones too difficult, too demanding, perhaps too associated with past failures, so we chase after novelty instead.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second and catch our breath. Wow. We've journeyed from the medical mistake, fixing without knowing the ideal, through the need for unpractical theorists, the problem with vague prejudices versus clear dogmas, and this really fascinating idea about fearing the past and its lost causes.
It's a lot to take in. Chesterton packs a punch.
He really does. And believe it or not, we're only about halfway through this absolutely wild ride that is What's Wrong with the World. Trust me, it gets even more mind-blowing from here. So if you're enjoying this deep dive, if these ideas are sparking something for you, please do take a quick moment to like this deep dive. Hit that subscribe button for the deep dive channel so you don't miss our future journeys, and maybe even consider joining our memberships to support us in bringing you more explorations like this.
Your support really does help us keep digging into these fascinating texts.
It absolutely does. Okay, ready to dive back in?
Let's do it.
All right, so after dismantling these big intellectual fallacies about progress and ideals, Chesterton shifts his focus. He zooms in on something incredibly personal, yet absolutely foundational to society: the family, the home.
Right, the oldest ideal, as he calls it.
The domestic ideal. He talks about the happy family, the holy family of history. But he notes right away that this ideal is under attack.
And he has a typically witty observation about who's attacking it.
Yeah, he says it's chiefly assailed by those who have never known it or by those who have failed to fulfill it. A bit pointed, perhaps.
Vintage Chesterton.
So how does he defend this domestic ideal against modern criticisms? He takes on free love, for instance.
He does. He basically argues that the whole idea of free love is a fallacy because it tries to ignore what he calls the earthquake consequences that nature itself attaches to sex.
Earthquake consequences.
Yeah, he uses these incredibly vivid, almost comical analogies. Imagine, he says, if lighting a cigarette instantly conjured a huge genie out of the smoke that then followed you around forever.
Okay. Bit inconvenient.
Or if whistling a jaunty tune immediately summoned an infant seraph, a baby angel, that you then had to, walk around with constantly.
Right. These actions would suddenly have massive, unavoidable long-term consequences.
Exactly. And sex, he says, is like that naturally. It produces a baby giant, a child, which inherently demands prolonged cooperation, commitment, a structure. So for a man involved, he's either a traitor, abandoning his responsibility, or a tied man, committed.
Yeah.
There's no truly consequence-free love in his view because nature imposes the ties.
That's a stark way of putting it.
It is. But then he does something really interesting. He tackles the common modern idea that domestic life, family life, is inherently dull and tame, predictable, boring.
Yeah, you still hear that today, home life versus adventure.
But Chesterton completely flips it. He says that's a rich man's opinion.
A rich man's opinion. Why?
Because, he argues, a rich man's home runs like clockwork. It moves on vast and soundless wheels of wealth, managed by an army of servants. Everything is smooth, predictable, insulated.
So for the rich man, the adventure has to be found outside the home, on the streets, in restaurants, traveling.
Precisely. His home is the sanctuary from chaos.
Yeah.
But for a poor man, Chesterton argues his life is inherently more precarious. Even his tamest adventure might end up in a police court just because the margins for error are so much smaller. His home life is the adventure, the struggle, the core drama.
That's a fascinating reversal. And he also pushes back against the idea of the wife as just an economic dependent, right?
Absolutely. He mocks the idea of the wife as a pretty clinging parasite.
Yeah.
He says, maybe that's true for the very wealthy, but for ordinary, poor, practical people, the wife is anything but economically dependent.
She's crucial to the household economy.
Totally indispensable. She mends the clothes, she cooks the fish, she's running a vital part of the operation. He asks, rhetorically, if Mr. Hodder was a pretty parasite clinging to Mr. Stoughton and their publishing firm. Of course not. They were partners. And it's the same, he argues, for working-class husband and wife. They are partners in a tough business.
Less parasite, more co-CEO of the household.
Exactly. And what does the normal man desire, according to Chesterton? Not just a roof over his head, but a house of his own to put them into. It's more than shelter. It's an objective and visible kingdom, a place with a fire to cook on, a door to open to friends. It's this enormous normality, he calls it, this fundamental human desire for a stable, independent home that modern society often fails to provide for ordinary people.
Which leads him to diagnose how society fails to provide it.
Yes, and this is where he introduces that absolutely crucial dynamic. The history of Hudge and Gudge.
Hudge and Gudge. Okay, who are they? Sounds like a comedy duo.
Almost, but with serious consequences. Hudge represents the energetic progressive, the reformer, always pushing for change, often state-led change. Gudge is the obstinate conservative, often a plutocrat, defending the status quo, tradition, property rights, usually his own.
So progressive versus conservative, they fight all the time, right?
They appear to quarrel constantly, yes. They have very public disagreements, but Chesterton develops this deep suspicion. He suspects there's a secret partnership going on.
A secret partnership between the progressive and the conservative. How would that work?
He thinks their public fights often distract from the fact that, in practice, their actions conspire to keep the common person down, to prevent true independence. He uses the example of slums.
Okay, slums. How do Hudge and Gudge handle slums?
Hudge, the progressive, comes along and says, these slums are terrible, we need reform. So he builds these tall, bare tenements. They're cleaner, maybe structurally sounder, improvement in some ways, but still lacking soul, lacking the visible kingdom Jones desires.
Okay, so Hudge offers a kind of sterile improvement. What about Gudge?
Gudge, the conservative plutocrat, often owns the slums, or benefits from the cheap labor they provide. So he might publicly romanticize the slums. He'll talk about the hardy character they build, how the slums and stinks made our England great. He defends the existing mess.
So one offers a bleak improvement, the other defends the squalor.
And the result? Chesterton says both Hudge and Gudge manage to keep the ordinary person in a state of dazed amiability, never quite getting what they truly need, which is genuine ownership, independence, a proper home. The oligarchy, he argues, plays both sides. They'll refuse peasant proprietorship, for instance, sometimes using advanced progressive arguments like state ownership is better, and other times using conservative arguments about tradition, or even humanitarian ones like forbidding people from keeping cows for supposedly health reasons.
Always a reason to keep the little guy from owning things.
Always a modern phrase, he says, to cover their ancient predominance. And this culminates in his powerful allegory, the homelessness of Jones.
Jones, the common man. Tell me about his homelessness.
Jones, Chesterton writes, just wants these divinely ordinary things. A decent house of his own, a family, a bit of land maybe, simple stuff. But he's constantly being pushed out, displaced by tyranny, personal or political.
How does this story go?
It's a kind of historical sweep. Jones starts with a home, gets pushed out into his front garden. Then maybe he's forced into mean lodgings in the city. All the while, some passing philosopher, representing the Hudges and Gudges of the world, keeps explaining to Jones that this displacement is actually progress.
Progress. Losing your home is progress.
That's the bitter irony. Living a bold life upon the bounty of nature in his garden becomes framed as primitive. Being forced into mercantile endeavor, wage labor, and cramped lodgings is framed as advancement. And the final step? the golden republic of the workhouse.
Good grief.
And Chesterton insists this is literally no exaggeration of the facts of English history. The enclosures, the Industrial Revolution, the rich consistently turn the poor out, promise them progress and civilization in the factories, always dangling some future utopia while taking away present possessions.
And how does this connect to women specifically?
He argues this system forces women, who he sees as naturally embodying the universalist ideal of the home, into harsh industrial work. They end up carrying a double burden, the demands of commerce and the responsibilities of domesticity, if they could even maintain a home.
So their efficiency in the workplace just adds to their load.
Exactly. He says their very efficiency is the definition of their slavery. It's presented as liberation, as entering the workforce, but he sees it as a new form of servitude imposed by the industrial system. And he criticizes some feminists of his time for, in his view, accepting these unwomanly wrongs, like harsh factory conditions, and then seeking unwomanly powers, like competing in male-dominated clerical roles, instead of attacking the root tyranny that destroyed the home in the first place.
He wants to destroy the tyranny, not redefine womanhood to fit it.
That's his position. He sees the constant appeal to the future as the ultimate tool of this tyranny. They took away rural life, promising a golden age of peace and commerce. Now they take away household dignity, promising some new utopia. The past, he says, was communal. The future they offer is starkly individualist and alienating. Always sacrificing the present, known good for a future, promised abstraction.
It's a bleak picture of how progress can be used to dispossess. And from the home, he moves to education, another foundational pillar.
Yes, and his take on education is predictably explosive.
I'm sensing a theme. How does he start?
He argues that a lot of modern sociology in his day, especially ideas around eugenics and heredity, is basically confusedly Calvinist.
Calvinist, like predestination. How does that relate to education?
Well, he sees him as obsessed with controlling the future generation, with educating the child before he exists. They focus immensely on the embryo, on breeding the right kind of people, almost like predestining who will be fit.
While being pessimistic about the people actually living now.
Exactly. He finds them singularly depressed about the current populace, the people they could actually influence now, but strangely cheerful about manipulating posterity. For Chesterton, this life, this short earthly life, is the main event, intensely thrilling and precious. A drama, a battle.
Whereas for the Fabian Calvinist, his term for this blend of socialist planning and determinism.
It's just a long procession of the victors and the vanquished, already sorted out. They focus on the embryo. Christians, he says, focus on the man.
Okay, that's a stark contrast in focus, but then he makes an even more radical claim about education itself.
He does. He just flat out declares there is no such thing as education.
Wait, what? No such thing as education? How can he say that?
He argues it doesn't exist as a distinct subject or entity like geology or chemistry or soldering. Education, he insists, isn't a thing. It's a method.
A method, like how you teach something.
Exactly. It's like transmission or inheritance. It's the process of passing something on facts, views, skills, values. It's not the content itself.
So even bad teaching is still education in his view.
Precisely. He uses the example of Fagin from Oliver Twist, teaching boys how to pick pockets and lie. Fagin, he says, is being just as educational in his method as a virtuous schoolmaster like Dr. Strong. Both are transmitting something.
Because for Chesterton, any teaching involves
Dogma. He says a teacher who is not dogmatic is simply a teacher who is not teaching. You have to be teaching something, some view of the world, some set of facts or values you believe to be true.
So the idea of neutral, value-free education is impossible.
Utterly impossible in his view. Everyone teaches their own dogma, their own faith, which for him are basically the same thing. You can't separate dogma from education because dogma is the content being transmitted.
Which leads him to criticize that modern slogan.
Save the children. Yes, he calls it an evil cry.
Evil? It sounds harsh. Saving children sounds good.
He argues it's born of terrified opportunism. Like in a shipwreck, you desperately try to save the kids because you've given up on the adults. It carries, he says, the hateful implication that it is impossible to save the fathers.
That society has basically written off the current generation of adults as unsalvageable.
Yes. Millions of grown-up, responsible Europeans dismissed as beyond hope. And Chesterton counters, unless you can save the fathers, you cannot save the children. How can we teach citizenship if we aren't good citizens? How can we pass on truth if we don't possess it ourselves? Education is truth in transmission.
You can't transmit what you don't have.
Exactly. And he also attacks the other common educational idea that it's all about drawing out what's already inside the child.
Yeah, nurturing their innate potential.
He dismisses it as nonsense. You don't draw out the English language from a baby, he scoffs.
Yeah.
You have to put it into him. You teach it. It's as absurd, he says, as claiming that milk comes from the baby instead of to the baby.
Okay, so education is transmission, it involves dogma, and it requires authority.
Yes, authority the unavoidable. He insists education is inherently violent in the sense of being an intervention and creative. It's always an interference with life and growth. You're shaping the child according to some ideal.
Even if you claim to be setting them free.
Even then, the free educator still decides what faculties to develop, what interests to encourage, and what to suppress or ignore. They might forbid adventure stories or tin soldiers, claiming they breed violence.
Well, Chesterton thinks.
He suspects boys would rather be flogged and unjustly slogged than have his adventure story taken away. His point is that this modern freedom is often just a fear of asserting a positive tradition, a fear of taking responsibility for shaping the next generation according to a definite human ideal.
He contrasts this modern innovator with Mrs. Grundy, the symbol of conventionality.
Yes. He says Mrs. Grundy, surprisingly, is actually a Democrat. Her authority comes from everybody else. It's based on common custom. The modern educational innovator, however, is often a despot, imposing their personal theories and fads without any real popular mandate.
Interesting take, and he believes everyone gets educated one way or another.
Absolutely. There are no uneducated people, he declares. Everybody in England is educated. Only most people are educated wrong.
Educated wrong.
By the constant barrage of modern life. Newspapers, advertisements, party politics. He thinks the poor are actually overeducated by this relentless, often shallow stream of information and persuasion.
So schools shouldn't add more complexity.
No. He thinks schools need to restore simplicity, to provide clarity and fundamental truths to counteract the roaring cataract of culture outside. They need to be clearer than a picture postcard and quicker than a tram, he says, to even compete.
What about the schools of his time, the famous English public schools?
He acknowledges they do succeed in one thing, producing gentlemen, according to a specific, if narrow, ideal. They transmit a certain code.
But he sees a major flaw.
A huge one. Their utterly blatant and indecent disregard of the duty of telling the truth.
Wow. What does he mean?
He says boys are taught not to care if something is a fact, but only whether it can be used effectively for their side in an argument, in playing the game. Truth becomes subordinate to rhetoric and point scoring.
Which explains
the whole party system in English politics, he argues, where scoring points off the opposition is more important than seeking truth. He even mocks the emphasis on physical cleanliness, the soap superstition.
the idea that being clean makes you morally better.
Yeah, he finds it ridiculous. Saints can afford to be dirty, he quibs. Seducers have to be clean. It turns a pleasure or a convenience into a moral duty, elevating the leisure habits of the gentleman, sport, washing, into core virtues.
And the problem is that the state elementary schools were just copying these flawed public school ideals.
Exactly. They were imitating the vices of the elite system, making them even more inappropriate for ordinary working children. Why emphasize the exaggerated glory of athletics for kids who get plenty of exercise with a spade? Why preach corporeal daintiness to those whose necessary work makes them dirty?
It's progress by precedent, just blindly copying the class above.
Yes, a mad and monotonous gallop that prevents any real radical rethinking of what education should be for the common person.
And the most damaging part of this whole system for him is its effect on parents.
Yes, the outlawed parent. This is perhaps the most poignant part of his critique. He sees parents, especially poor parents, being completely sidelined and their own traditions undermined by the education system.
How so?
He argues that the traditions of the poor are mostly simply the traditions of humanity. Basic human stuff. Maybe talking coarsely about harsh realities, joking about appearances, mourning openly and emotionally, things common across cultures.
But the schools try to stamp these out.
Yes, replaced by the standards of the middle-class schoolmaster who preached soap and socialism against beer and liberty. The school imposes the minority's customs.
So modern education becomes a tool for
handing down the customs of the minority and rooting out the customs of the majority. It disconnects children from their own families and heritage, imposing an alien set of values.
That's a powerful indictment. And from education, he takes aim at an even broader philosophical trend.
Yes, what he calls the empire of the insect.
The empire of the insect? What's that about?
He's targeting a line of thought. He traces back to thinkers like Edmund Burke, and also certain interpretations of Darwinism, essentially. The idea that humanity must simply adapt itself to its circumstances, like an animal molds itself to its environment.
Instead of trying to change the circumstances.
Exactly. Instead of acting like an angel, as he puts it, and altering conditions to fit a human ideal. Burke argued, for example, that people get the government they deserve because they are shaped by their environment. Darwinism, misinterpreted, could suggest we should just adapt to whatever social conditions arise.
And Chesterton sees this as dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. He warns it threatens to twist humanity into inhuman hybrids. If the system demands it, must we adapt? If a millionaire needs workers with 10 arms, must porters evolve them? It leads to a nightmare of forced adaptation.
Where people become specialized tools for the system. Grooms born bow-legged, tailors cross-legged.
Yes, horrific images. Against this, Chesterton champions what he sees as the core Christian and human idea, that one good and happy man is an end in himself, that a soul is worth saving. The individual human, in their proper form, is the goal.
But this adaptation thinking, the soul of the hive, where the collective is everything,
is destroying the human family, he believes. The hive, society conceived as an insect colony, has become more important than the house, the human home.
How does this connect to political ideologies like socialism, in his view?
Well, he used another brilliant analogy, the fallacy of the umbrella stand.
Umbrella stand, okay.
He argues some socialists make a mistake. They see that some things can be shared communally, like an umbrella stand in a hall, or the umbrella itself when it's raining. It makes sense for two men to share one umbrella, public goods.
Okay, shared resources, makes sense.
But then, he says, they wrongly assume everything can or should be communal. Just because you can share an umbrella doesn't mean two men can happily share one walking stick. That's a personal item.
Ah, the difference between public and private goods.
Exactly. He applies this to the idea of communal kitchens, which often follow talk of communal laundries.
Why does a communal laundry make sense but not a kitchen for him?
Because, he argues, there's basically one right way to wash a shirt clean. It's a mechanical process. Laundry lends itself to collectivization, but cooking.
Cooking is personal, an art.
Exactly. It's an art, full of personality, preference, even perversity. Trying to run a communal kitchen is like trying to get 3 different composers to play 3 different tunes simultaneously on the same piano. It misunderstands the intensely personal nature of food and taste.
So for him, socialism sometimes misunderstands human nature by trying to collectivize things that are inherently individual or familial.
That's his critique. It confuses the public umbrella with the private walking stick.
And this all comes back to Hudge and Gudge, doesn't it? The final showdown.
Yes, the dreadful duty of Gudge. Or rather, the dreadful duty facing both Hudge and Gudge if they're serious. He revisits their supposed quarrel. The Tory, Gudge, wants to preserve a traditional family life that, for the poor, barely exists anymore because of poverty. The socialist, Hudge, talks about progress, but is often vague about whether the traditional family should even be preserved.
So Chesterton cuts through it all and asks the fundamental question.
Do you want to keep the family at all? Yes or no?
And if the answer is yes,
then both sides have massive work to do. Hudge, the socialist or progressive, must accept certain realities Chesterton believes are inherent to family life, like maybe some gender distinctions in roles, woman managing the private house, man more in the public house, certain characteristics, woman is thrifty, humorous, organizer, child needing authority, things he believes will naturally recur if families are truly free and sovereign.
Okay, so Hudge has to accept some traditional elements. What about Gudge?
Gudge the Tory, the plutocrat, has to make very big sacrifices. Specifically, he has to accept the need to equalize property.
Equalize property. That sounds radical for the conservative.
Extremely radical. Chesterton's point is blunt. The overwhelming majority of English people in his day are simply too poor to be domestic. They can't afford the space, the security, the resources needed for true family life.
So if Gudge really wants to preserve the family,
he and his rich friends must shell out to a vastly greater extent than any radical politician has yet dared to suggest. It requires nothing less than the distribution of the great fortunes and the great estates.
Wow. So preserving the traditional family requires a revolution in property distribution.
That's Chesterton's stunning conclusion. The only way to avoid socialism, he argues, is by enacting a change just as vast and revolutionary as socialism itself. You have to revolutionize the nation economically in order to preserve the family.
That turns the usual political alignments completely upside down.
Totally. It forces both sides to confront the real cost of their stated ideals.
And as the book closes, Chesterton reveals that horrible suspicion he mentioned earlier.
Yes, that Hudge and Gudge, the progressive and the conservative, aren't really opponents at all.
But secretly in partnership, their public fights are a put-up job.
He comes to believe it's not just coincidence that they always seem to end up reinforcing the system that benefits the wealthy and powerful. It's too consistent.
What examples does he give of this secret partnership in action?
They're chillingly precise. Gudge, the plutocrat, wants a pool of cheap female labor for his factories. Hudge, the idealist, comes along and calls this freedom for women to live her own life, reframing exploitation as liberation.
Okay, what else?
Gudge wants docile, obedient workmen who won't cause trouble. Hudge preaches teetotalism and temperance, but mainly to the working class, not to Gudge himself, making them more sober and manageable.
Controlling their behavior under the guise of moral improvement.
Exactly. Gudge wants a timid population that won't rise up against tyranny. Hudge obligingly preaches Tolstoyan non-resistance, arguing nobody should ever take up arms against anything.
Convenient for Gudge.
Very. Gudge is naturally clean and well-washed because he has the means. Hudge earnestly preaches the gospel of Gudge's cleanliness to the poor, who lack the facilities to practice it, making them feel inadequate.
So between them, they maintain the status quo while looking like they're fighting.
That's the grand deception, as Chesterton sees it. Hudge and Gudge together still keep the common man homeless, always promising some future glorious outgrowth of the family while systematically undermining its foundations in the present. It's a constant erosion of common life, dignity, and independence, all masked by the noise of their performative quarrel.
That's a deeply cynical but powerful conclusion about how power might operate. How does he end the book? What's the final image?
He ends with arguably the most powerful and memorable image in the entire book, a simple, devastating parable. The little girl's hair.
The little girl's hair. Tell me about it.
He describes how doctors and social reformers in his time decreed that poor girls living in slums must have their hair cut very short to prevent the spread of lice, because the slum conditions were so squalid and overcrowded that lice were rampant. It was a practical hygienic measure.
Okay. Sounds logical, if sad.
But Chesterton's reaction is pure fire, he says, with scathing indignation. It never seems to have occurred to them to abolish the lice.
Meaning, attack the source of the problem.
Exactly. Or even more fundamentally, he says, it never occurred to them to abolish the slums that bred the lice in the first place.
They were treating the symptom drastically instead of the disease.
Precisely. This becomes his ultimate symbol for everything that's wrong. Society is hacking off the hair of the slaves, altering the victim to fit the disease, instead of cutting off the heads of the tyrants who perpetuate the system.
Instead of fixing the slums, they modify the children.
Yes, he says it's like pulling out teeth because of a toothache or cutting off people's noses because they have dirty noses. They prioritize the smooth running of institutions, hygiene, convenience over the integrity of the normal flesh and spirit of human beings.
So the central truth is,
the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. All institutions, all systems must be judged and damned, if necessary, based on whether they serve and fit the needs of ordinary human life, the normal flesh and spirit. The problem isn't the girl's hair. The problem is the slum. Don't change the person. Change the conditions.
And from that image, he launches his final fiery declaration.
It's unforgettable, he says. With the red hair of one she-urchin in the gutter, I will set fire to all modern civilization.
Wow, that's intense. What's the logic behind that? How does one girl's hair lead to burning down civilization?
He lays out the chain of command, the logical consequences of taking that one small human detail seriously. Because a girl should have long, clean, healthy hair, a basic human normality. Yeah. She therefore needs a clean home. Because she needs a clean home, she needs a mother who is free and has sufficient leisure to care for her and the home. Because she needs a free and leisured mother, the family should not be crushed by a usurious landlord or impossible working conditions. Because there should not be usurious landlords and exploitation, there must be a fundamental redistribution of property. And because that redistribution is necessary,
there shall be a revolution.
Exactly. Starting from the concrete, undeniable, simple good of a child's well-being, he logically derives the necessity of complete social transformation.
She becomes the human and sacred image.
Yes. All around her the social fabric shall sway and split and fall, the pillars of society shall be shaken, and the roofs of ages come rushing down, and not one hair of her head shall be harmed. The human person is the standard by which society must be judged. And if society fails that standard, society must change, however radically.
And he has that final twist, doesn't he? About why people don't rebel.
Right at the end. He argues paradoxically that the mob can never rebel unless it is conservative.
Conservative? How can rebels be conservative?
Conservative enough, he says, to have conserved some reasons for rebelling. Meaning you need to actually hold on to some fundamental beliefs, some traditions, some sense of what is right and normal for human beings in order to even recognize that things are wrong and worth fighting against.
So if the system is too effective at eroding those basic traditions and ideals,
people forget why they should rebel. They lose their standard of comparison. They adapt to the inhuman conditions, just like the empire of the insect thinking encourages.
Which leaves us, the listeners, with a really profound question.
Indeed. What are those fundamental human ideals, those adamantine tendernesses, as Chesterton might call them, in your life?
What are the non-negotiables, the things you believe are so fundamentally right about human life, like that little girl's hair, that you would fight to preserve them, even if it meant shaking the pillars of society? What would you risk everything for to ensure what is right prevails?
A powerful challenge.
It really is. Well, that was our deep dive into G.K. Chesterton's challenging, provocative, and surprisingly relevant What's Wrong with the World.
We hope it's given you plenty to think about, maybe a new lens to look through.
Yeah, a new way to filter the constant noise and clamor of our own modern world. If you want to continue this conversation, share your own thoughts in the comments below.
We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep digging deep, and maybe most importantly after today, keep asking what's right.